She was raised as a servant in the house that should have been hers. But when her mother's dying words reveal a buried truth, the real daughter of the manor must rise, from ashes, from silence, and from betrayal, to reclaim the life stolen from her. Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The rain tapped lightly on the tin roof of the servant quarters, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the shallow breaths rising from Miriam's chest. The room was dim, lit only by a single oil lamp on the wooden stool beside her bed. The flame flickered uncertainly, casting long shadows on the cracked walls. Amara knelt beside her mother, clutching her cold, thin hand. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her tears had slowed now, replaced by a creeping dread she couldn't shake. "Mama, please don't leave me." "Not yet." Miriam's lips moved barely, her voice a rasp of wind. "Amara." Amara leaned closer, pressing her ear to her mother's dry mouth. "There's something you must know," Miriam whispered, her eyes fluttering. "Before I go." Amara's heart pounded. "What is it, Mama?" Miriam's eyes opened for a brief second, wide, glassy, full of something between sorrow and relief. "You are not who they say you are." Amara blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "You are not a maid's daughter," Miriam rasped. "You are Gideon's child, lord of the house. Your father." The world seemed to slow, her breath catching in her throat. "No," Amara breathed, shaking her head. "What are you saying?" "I loved him. Long ago, before she came," Miriam said, coughing weakly. Blood touched the corners of her lips. "He never knew. I was with child. I tried to tell him, but then Evelyn, she found out. She made sure the truth stayed buried." Amara felt the floor tilt beneath her. Her vision blurred. "You were meant to be in that house. Not in these rags." Miriam's body trembled, her words thinning like mist. "Mama?" Amara called, gripping her hand tighter. "Mama, stay with me." But her mother had already gone still. The weight of her last breath lingered in the room like a ghost. The silence was unbearable. Amara clutched her mother's hand, tears falling freely now. Every word echoed louder in her head, "Gideon's child. Your father. Meant to be in that house." As dawn broke through the gray rain clouds, a new truth was born in the ashes of Amara's grief. A truth that could burn down everything, if only someone would believe it. The grand house stood like a silent judge on the hill, its stone walls gleaming in the morning sun. Inside, servants bustled quietly, careful not to disturb the illusion of nobility that draped the estate like a velvet curtain. In the drawing room, Lady Evelyn sat with her tea, porcelain cup perched delicately between her fingers, a knowing smirk tracing her lips. She had felt it, the shift. Word had spread through the estate before the dawn fog lifted. Miriam was dead. Across the rug, Celeste lounged on the settee, idly flipping through a fashion journal. Her golden curls were pinned just so, and her dress, soft lilac silk, was fresh from the city. She glanced at her mother, bored. "So the maids finally kicked it?" Lady Evelyn stirred her tea. "Yes. Pity. I'm sure the rats will miss her." Celeste snorted. "And that stray daughter of hers, what's her name again?" "Mara." "Alma?" "Amara," Lady Evelyn said coldly. "And don't underestimate her. She may have dirt under her nails, but she's dangerous." Celeste arched a brow. "To who?" "Her broom." Lady Evelyn leaned forward. Her voice dropped into a whisper. "To everything we've built. To you. She's not just some servant girl, Celeste. She is," she paused, biting the words back. "She knows." The air shifted. Even Celeste sat up straighter. "Knows what?" Lady Evelyn's eyes darkened. "That she doesn't belong down there. That you don't belong up here." Her mother told her. For a moment, silence clung to the room like damp air. "Then we get rid of her," Celeste said flatly. "Or remind her of her place." Lady Evelyn's smile returned, slow and poisonous. "Precisely. She's vulnerable. Alone. And Gideon would never believe a word from her mouth. Not after all these years. We just have to make sure she stays voiceless." Down in the kitchen, Amara stood staring at the long stone sink. Her hands trembled as she scrubbed dishes with numbed fingers. The warm soap did nothing to ease the cold in her chest. No one had looked at her with kindness since she entered the manor that morning. A few older maids had whispered condolences, but most kept their distance. Some out of fear, others because they'd long since learned that closeness to Amara brought trouble. She barely noticed when Celeste glided into the kitchen, her heeled boots tapping sharply against the floor. "Oh," she said sweetly. "Did you drop something? Or are you just finally bowing to your betters?" Amara didn't turn. "What do you want?" Celeste clicked her tongue. "Just checking on the little orphan. You know, it's funny, losing a mother so soon after her lies. Coincidence?" Amara's fingers froze around the plate. She didn't lie. Celeste's expression changed subtly, mockery mixed with panic, quickly masked. "You poor thing," she said, leaning in. "You're seriously going to embarrass yourself with that story? You think anyone would believe you over my mother?" Amara turned, eyes calm but fierce. "I'm going to tell him." Celeste's hand flew before she thought, smacking the plate from Amara's hands. It shattered on the floor between them. "You'll regret it," Celeste hissed. "You don't belong in this house." Amara met her eyes, voice steady. "Then I'll take my place by force." Lord Gideon sat alone in his study, the heavy oak door closed behind him. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall arched window, casting a golden hue over the shelves of leather-bound books, dusty relics, and faded portraits. His fingers rested on a half-written letter, his mind elsewhere. He hadn't cried when he heard Miriam was gone. He hadn't even gone down to see her. But something inside him, something old and buried, had stirred. He remembered the maid she used to be. Quiet, gentle, always with a touch of sadness behind her smile. He'd loved her once, before marriage, before duty, before Evelyn. She'd walked away from him without a word. Or so he'd believed. A knock broke through his thoughts. "Enter," he called, straightening. The door creaked open. A familiar figure stepped in, Amara, eyes rimmed with red, her hands clenched tightly in front of her. She didn't wear a morning dress. She wore the same threadbare clothes she'd always worn. And yet, there was something different in her posture. A defiant kind of sorrow. "Lord Gideon," she said, her voice controlled. "I need to speak with you." He blinked. "Shouldn't you be with the other staff?" She took a breath. "I came because my mother told me something. Before she died." He raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Amara's mouth went dry. This was the moment. The one she'd rehearsed all night in her head, over and over again. She said, "I'm your daughter." The silence was instant. Heavy. Alive. Gideon sat back in his chair slowly, his face unreadable. She said, "You and she were together years ago. Before you married Lady Evelyn. And that she became pregnant. But she never told you." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "That's quite the claim." "I'm not lying. I didn't say you were," he said carefully. "But my relationship with Miriam ended long ago. If she truly bore my child, why would she keep it secret? Why wait until her deathbed to confess? She was scared." "Your wife." "She was a maid, Amara," he interrupted. "A loyal one, but a servant. She had every opportunity to tell me the truth. She chose silence." Amara's heart dropped. "But This is a dangerous story you're playing with," Gideon said, more sternly now. "And Evelyn is already grieving in her own way. Stirring conflict in this house, especially now, is unwise." Her lips parted in disbelief. "So you won't even consider it? Not even the possibility?" He looked at her, and for a moment, there was something flickering in his eyes. Hesitation, maybe even doubt, but it vanished. "Go back to your duties." She stood there a moment longer, her hope cracking like ice underfoot. "I'm not trying to take anything," she whispered. "I just want the truth." Gideon looked away. Truth needs proof. Back in the hallway, Amara walked like a ghost, her legs numb beneath her. Celeste leaned against the banister just outside the study door, waiting like a vulture. "No warm hug from Daddy?" she asked mockingly. Amara didn't stop. She didn't speak. Celeste's smile faded. For the first time, she saw it. Amara wasn't backing down. She was becoming dangerous. The days that followed were thick with tension. The manor was quiet in the way a storm is before it breaks, still, sharp, humming with pressure. Amara moved through the corridors with her head high, though every step echoed with silent threats. Whispers followed her like shadows. Servants who once spoke to her now averted their eyes. A few glanced up with pity, but none with courage. In the dining room, Celeste sat at the long, polished table, slicing strawberries with surgical precision. Lady Evelyn, in a cream brocade gown, glanced toward the window where Amara was visible in the garden below, scrubbing stone steps. "She hasn't left," Celeste muttered, watching her. "She's clinging to this lie like it's a crown." Lady Evelyn's jaw clenched. "She's testing boundaries. Like a mutt that forgets it's a mutt. Should we threaten her?" "No," Evelyn said, stirring her tea slowly. "Threats are cheap. Humiliation lasts longer." Outside, the sky was hot and gray. Amara's hands were raw from scrubbing, her fingers sore and pink. But she didn't stop. Each scrape of the brush felt like a punishment she welcomed, and a reminder she would endure. She had to. A soft voice broke the silence. "You're wasting your time, girl." She turned to see old cook Benna, wiping her hands on her apron, eyes narrowed against the sun. "They've already made up their minds about you," Benna added. "I don't care," Amara said, jaw set. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to prove the truth." Benna walked closer, lowering her voice. "And how do you plan to do that? The man you're trying to convince doesn't even want to remember the past." "I'll find something. A letter. A witness. Anything." Benna stared at her a moment, then sighed. "You remind me of your mother. Just as stubborn. Just as foolish." Amara looked up sharply. "You knew." "I suspected. Miriam never said it outright. But there were moments. I saw the way she looked at Lord Gideon, and the way he used to watch her, before Lady Evelyn turned him cold." Amara's chest tightened. "So you believe me?" "I believe in silence," Benna said, eyes hardening. "It's what keeps people alive around here. But if you're going to dig up ghosts, be ready to live with them." Later that night, after the manor slept, Amara crept into the east wing. She had only been in this part of the house twice in her life. It was where Lord Gideon kept his private library and storage rooms. Old trunks, sealed boxes, dusty portraits no longer displayed. By candlelight she searched. She opened drawers and cabinets. She flipped through old account books, brittle with age. She scanned handwritten letters that smelled of ink and time. Then, buried beneath a pile of loose documents in a wooden chest, she found a small folded paper. Yellowed. Fragile. Her mother's handwriting. The ink had faded, but she could still make out pieces. "You must know. I never meant to keep her from you. I was afraid." Evelyn found out, threatened to. Her hands shook. The letter was unfinished. Torn at the bottom. But it was something. A whisper from the past. A spark of truth in a house built on lies. The night was unnervingly quiet. Not a creak in the floorboards. Not even the owls dared to call. Amara sat cross-legged on the stone floor of the forgotten storage room, the torn letter clutched in her hand. The candle beside her was burning low, its wax dripping onto a faded rug. She reread the words for the 10th time, mouthing them silently, as though her mother's voice might rise from the parchment itself. "You must know. I never meant to keep her from you. I was afraid." Evelyn found out, threatened to. Threatened to what? Take her away? Ruin her? Kill her? The rest of the letter had been torn off cleanly, too cleanly. Someone had meant to silence it. She folded it carefully and tucked it into the lining of her apron. It wasn't enough, not to prove the truth, but it was a beginning. She would need more. A name. A witness. Something harder to deny. By dawn, the house was already stirring. Amara barely slept, but she moved with a strange new calm, like something inside her had solidified overnight. She waited until midday, when she knew Lord Gideon would be in the rose parlor, reading. He always sat there when the weather was clear. It reminded him of his youth, people said. Of simpler days. She walked in without knocking. He glanced up from his chair. "Amara, I found something," she said simply. He looked at her, frowning. "What are you doing in this wing?" Without a word, she stepped forward and placed the letter on the table beside him. He stared at it for a moment. His fingers hesitated before picking it up. As he read, his brow furrowed. The air grew heavier with every line he took in. "Where did you find this?" he asked finally. "In a chest, buried beneath old books." He read it again. Then again. "This is her handwriting," he muttered. "But why? Why wouldn't she tell me this herself?" She tried. Evelyn stopped her. "That's what the letter says." "It says many things," he said, voice taut. Things impossible to confirm. This letter could be fabricated. You could have written it. Her voice didn't waver. Then why would I hide it in a forgotten chest and wait for you to find it? Why now, after she's gone? He stood suddenly, anger flickering behind his eyes. Not at her, but at something deeper, older. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is dangerous. You're accusing my wife of deception, of cruelty, of lying about my daughter, about Celeste. Amara didn't flinch. She's not your daughter. His face went pale. You don't know what you're saying. I know what my mother told me. I know what this letter says. And I know what's in my blood, even if you refuse to see it. The room held its breath. Gideon looked down at the paper in his hands. Torn. Faint. Incomplete. I want to believe you, he said quietly. Part of me wants to, desperately. But truth needs more than emotion. It needs weight. Amara nodded slowly. Then I'll find the weight. She turned and left, leaving the letter trembling in his hand. In the hall outside, Evelyn watched from behind a half-opened door, lips pressed into a hard, bloodless line. In her hand was the other half of the letter, the part she'd torn away years ago, burned down to ash, except for one piece she'd kept locked away. As insurance. And now Amara was digging far too deep. Her time was running out. The scent of summer dust hung thick in the air as Amara descended the back staircase into the cellar. She had spent the past week combing through every corner of the estate, forgotten closets, discarded trunks, even the library's sealed records. But the trail of truth had grown colder, tighter, crueler. Lady Evelyn's wrath was now barely hidden beneath civility. Servants who once nodded in greeting now flinched when Amara passed, afraid of being seen with her. Her chores had doubled. Her meals were mysteriously forgotten. Her bedding had been soiled with ink. Celeste, always nearby, watched her with a predator's smile. Yet Amara did not break. She rose early. She scrubbed harder. And every night she searched. Now, as she moved through the cellar's damp, stone corridor, she followed a faint lead. An old name her mother once muttered in sleep. Elsa. Elsa had been a maid before Amara was born. Vanished from the estate under quiet circumstances. But Benna, ever watchful, had remembered her. And she had remembered where Elsa had gone. It took 2 days to reach the crumbling cottage on the edge of Eastmark, nestled in a forgotten field, swallowed by vines. Amara knocked once. Twice. Then the door creaked open. An older woman peered out, eyes sharp despite the weathered lines on her face. Her hair, once chestnut, had silvered around the edges. You look like Miriam, she said without invitation. Come in. Inside, Elsa served tea in chipped cups and sat across from Amara in silence. She's gone, she asked, staring into her drink. Amara nodded. She told me everything before she passed. About Gideon. About me. Elsa exhaled through her nose. I knew this day would come. Why didn't you speak? I tried. But Evelyn, she made sure no one could. She controlled everything. The staff, the money, even Gideon's time. And I was just a maid. She threatened my family. Said she'd call me a thief. I was young. I left. Amara leaned forward. But you knew. Elsa nodded. I helped Miriam hide the first letter. The one meant for Gideon. When Evelyn found it, she nearly tore the house apart. She was pregnant at the time, or so she said. But it wasn't his child. Amara's breath caught. She admitted it to me in a fit of rage. Said she had to get him to marry her quickly, or her scandal would ruin everything. She needed a man like Gideon to legitimize her daughter. Celeste, Amara whispered. Elsa nodded. Celeste was born 7 months after the wedding. Too early. Too quiet. But Gideon, he was blind. In love. And once Evelyn tightened the leash, he never questioned a thing again. Amara's voice trembled. Would you tell him this? Would you testify? Elsa hesitated, then reached into an old drawer. She pulled out a half-burned paper. This is the rest of the letter. The part Evelyn never found. I kept it, because I couldn't forget Miriam's face the night she wrote it. She was shaking. She knew she was signing her fate. Amara took it with reverent hands. It was a perfect match. The same paper. Same ink. Same confession, continued. If this reaches you, it means I've failed to speak. But I beg you, look at her. She is yours. She has your eyes. Your fire. Evelyn knows. She always knew. And still, she chose to hide it. Amara wept, not from grief, but from the weight of knowing the truth was no longer just hers. Later that evening, as the sun bled orange behind the hills, Amara stepped back onto the manor grounds with Elsa beside her. She wasn't just a servant now. She was a reckoning. The doors of the great hall groaned open, and the air inside shifted. Amara stepped in first, her chin raised, dressed simple but clean. Behind her came Elsa, older, slower but unflinching. The gathered staff murmured as they passed, like leaves rustling before a storm. Lady Evelyn and Celeste were already seated near Lord Gideon, their eyes sharp with suspicion. "Why is she here?" Evelyn snapped, standing. Lord Gideon lifted a hand. "Let them speak." His voice, calm but weighted, silenced the room. Amara stepped forward, her gaze fixed on him. "You asked for proof," she said. "I brought it." She unfolded the 2 pieces of the letter and placed them gently on the table before him. 2 halves of a whole, at last reunited. Elsa followed with a small, worn pouch. From it, she withdrew a locket with an old photograph inside, a picture of Miriam, holding a newborn, dated and stamped in ink. On the back, a familiar signature in Gideon's own hand. "To Miriam, with love, forever yours." Gee. Gideon's face changed. Slowly, like the cracking of old stone. He reached for the letter first. As he read, the color drained from his skin. His hands trembled. His breath hitched. Then Elsa spoke. "I was there, Lord Gideon. I watched Lady Evelyn tear the letter in half and burn what she could. I helped Miriam hide what was left. And I heard Evelyn say it herself, Celeste was never your child." A sharp intake of breath sounded across the hall. Celeste stood up, her chair screeching behind her. "You lying witch. You were dismissed from this house for stealing." "No," Gideon said softly, still staring at the letter. "She wasn't." He stood slowly, letter in one hand, locket in the other. He turned to Evelyn, whose face had turned to porcelain, cold, pale, and full of cracks. "Is it true?" he asked. His voice was no longer soft. Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came. "Is it true?" She glanced at Celeste, then back at him. "I did what I had to do. You were about to marry a maid. You were going to throw away everything. You told me Celeste was mine." Evelyn's nostrils flared. "I had no choice. You were too blind with love for that servant girl. She was never meant to stand beside you." "But she did," Gideon growled. "In silence. In sacrifice. She gave me a daughter, and died without ever knowing if I'd accept her." He turned to Amara now, and this time he saw her. Not as a maid. Not as a nuisance. But as the girl who had always been his. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I failed you." Amara's throat tightened, but she didn't cry. She just nodded. That was enough for now. Evelyn reached for Celeste's hand, but the girl recoiled, tears brimming in her eyes. "You lied to me too," Celeste whispered. And just like that, the empire Evelyn built, on deception, fear, and stolen blood, collapsed. By nightfall, Evelyn and Celeste had been escorted from the estate. The staff didn't cheer. They didn't whisper. They simply watched, and for the first time in years, they didn't look at Amara with pity. They looked at her with awe. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the manor's east wing, gilding the marble floors in a soft golden light. Amara stood alone in the hall, her hand brushing the carved railing as she gazed down at the grand staircase. It looked different now, not just because Lady Evelyn's portraits had been removed, or Celeste's shoes no longer echoed along the polished floor, but because it felt different. It felt like hers. Not in a way that screamed power or vengeance, but in the quiet, steady way a seed becomes a tree. In the days after the truth came out, the estate changed. Lord Gideon moved out of his private study and into the drawing room more often, always watching Amara with a mixture of guilt and wonder. They spoke in cautious sentences at first, testing the space between them like 2 strangers crossing a bridge. But slowly the gaps closed. He told her stories of his youth. She told him about her mother's lullabies. And one afternoon, as they sat in the rose garden, he asked softly, "Would you take the family name?" Amara paused, then nodded. "I'll take it," she said, for her. The servants, once wary, began to meet her eyes again. Cook Benna handed her the largest slice of bread without a word. The stable boy brought her the gentlest mare. Even the butler began to bow a little lower. Not out of fear, but respect. She never demanded it. She didn't need to. One rainy morning, Amara found herself in Miriam's old quarters, still untouched. The bed was neatly made, the little wooden box on the table still locked. She sat on the edge and opened her mother's diary for the first time. Inside were memories that melted through her. Entries about her first smile, her first steps, the first time Miriam feared someone might discover the truth. And at the very end, a final entry written with a shaking hand. I don't know if she'll ever know who she really is. But she's stronger than I ever was. Braver. If the world turns its back on her, I hope she turns back with fire. Amara closed the diary gently, pressing it to her chest. Mama, I know now, and I won't waste it. Later that day, Lord Gideon gathered the staff in the great hall. His voice echoed off the high ceilings as he made the announcement. From this day forward, Amara will be known as Amara Gideon, daughter of this house, and heir to everything I leave behind. No one spoke, but no one objected. The silence was an acceptance. In the reflection of the tall, arched mirror at the end of the hall, Amara saw herself, no longer in a servant's smock, but in a deep green gown that shimmered like the forest after rain. She didn't look like the maid's daughter anymore. She looked like who she had always been. A daughter, a survivor, a rightful heir. The house that had tried to crush her would now carry her name. And for the first time in her life, Amara smiled without fear.